On the afternoon of June 8, 2018, while navigating the waters near the Long Island Strait, a group of fishermen aboard a commercial vessel encountered a chilling sight. Floating in the waves was the lifeless body of a man. As they drew closer, they observed clear signs of distress. Without delay, they contacted the Coast Guard to report their grim find. In response, law enforcement swiftly arrived at the scene to recover the body, revealing a young man with puzzling bruises and wounds. Later identified as Spencer McFord, his disappearance along with his girlfriend, Sophia McKenna, just days earlier had sparked widespread concern. Determining the circumstances of Spencer's tragic demise became a priority, leading authorities to conduct a thorough examination of his remains. The ensuing autopsy revealed that drowning was the cause of death. However, despite careful investigation, forensic experts found no signs of foul play. All injuries appeared consistent with exposure to water. Yet, Spencer's death only added to the growing mystery surrounding a string of disappearances in the area that weekend. 2 other men met similarly tragic fates, their bodies found submerged in the water. Initially considered tragic accidents, these incidents raised unsettling questions. Amidst the uncertainty, one disturbing detail remained. The absence of Sophia McKenna vanished without a trace. Her fate intertwined with Spencer's in a narrative fraught with unanswered queries. This enigmatic saga unfurled on the ominous night of May 27, 2018 in the quaint town of Groan, nestled within Connecticut's northeastern expanse. Revered for its storied history and tales of spectral apparitions, the lighthouse bore witness to a tragedy that transcended mortal understanding. Legend spoke of Ernie, the lighthouse's inaugural keeper, whose love lost drove him to a fatal plunge from its heights. It was to this hallowed ground that Spencer and Sophia ventured, their fates entwined with the mysteries that shrouded the ancient structure. Ever since the rumors began circulating about strange happenings at the lighthouse, both locals and tourists alike have recounted peculiar occurrences. Reports range from doors and windows mysteriously opening to bed sheets slipping off beds without any logical explanation. Sailors have recounted tales of radio switching on autonomously and ships inexplicably becoming unmoored from the shore. These stories have propelled the lighthouse into the spotlight, featuring prominently in numerous television programs dedicated to the paranormal. Despite the speculative nature of these claims, the allure of the lighthouse's enigmatic atmosphere continues to draw people in. Spencer and Sophia were no exception. They had harbored a long-standing desire to explore the mysteries of this iconic landmark. Setting out on the eve of Memorial Day, they embarked on an adventure that would soon take a troubling turn. On Saturday 27th, Sophia's friend Austin attempted to reach her, only to be met with silence. Initially unconcerned, he assumed she was simply sleeping in. However, as hours passed without any response, worry crept in. Contacting Sophia's mother, Michelle, Austin discovered a string of missed calls from an unfamiliar number on Michelle's phone. Upon attempting to return the calls, they reached Spencer's voicemail instead, sparking further concern. With anxiety mounting, Michelle and Austin sprang into action, scouring the area for any sign of their missing loved ones. Austin called local hospitals, while Michelle wasted no time in filing a missing persons report with the authorities. Meanwhile, Spencer's family shared in their apprehension, noting his absence from a family gathering and his failure to respond to their attempts at communication. Their search led them to Spencer's apartment, but it yielded no clues. Spencer's mother recalled their conversation at 10 p.m., hinting at his intentions to meet Sophia, despite previous plans. As the pieces of the puzzle slowly fell into place, the mystery surrounding their disappearance deepened, leaving both families grasping for answers in the darkness. When Spencer bid her goodnight, realizing something had happened, prompting his family to alert the authorities around 6:30 p.m. regarding his and his girlfriend's sudden disappearance. Swiftly, the police initiated their search for the missing duo. Austin reached out to the sheriff disclosing crucial information about Sophia and Spencer's whereabouts the prior night, admitting his consent for Sophia's visit there. He elaborated on discovering a Snapchat video posted by Sophia, capturing moments aboard a boat en route to the lighthouse. The footage depicted a jovial scene with Spencer rowing towards the destination. Subsequently, Sophia uploaded the video playfully posing by the lighthouse's concrete barrier, embellished with a "Do Not Cross" sign. The events following the snapshot remain shrouded in mystery. Mere minutes after the upload, at 2:05 a.m., Spencer's phone initiated a series of calls to Michelle, Sophia's mother, persisting at intervals of 206, 208, and culminating at 209. Michelle, deep in slumber, missed all calls with no voicemails or texts left and no record of contact with emergency services. The visual evidence confirmed the couple's presence at the lighthouse, prompting the dispatch of 20 Coast Guard units. A coordinated effort ensued, with the Coast Guard, firefighters, and police scouring the area by air, sea, and land. The first significant discovery was Sophia's abandoned car on the university campus, accompanied by her cell phone. Simultaneously, the Coast Guard recovered Spencer's T-shirt, as seen in the video, hinting at its use for securing the boat. The search persisted relentlessly through the night and into the following day. As the storm rolled in, state authorities made the difficult decision to halt the search for the missing young couple, Spencer and Sophia, until new leads or signs surfaced. This announcement sent shock waves through their families and friends, who refused to give up hope. They took matters into their own hands, plastering the city with posters and spreading the word about Spencer and Sophia's disappearance. Their plea to the public for any information fell largely on deaf ears, despite the bustling streets at the time of their vanishing, yielding no witnesses. In the midst of the family's relentless search efforts, questions swirled unanswered. Why did Sophia repeatedly call her mother? And why the hesitation to leave a voicemail or contact the authorities? Speculation ran rampant. Could their disappearance be tied to their recent brush with the law, having stolen a boat and ventured to the forbidden lighthouse? Sophia's prior legal entanglements and Spencer's DUI arrest might have fueled her reluctance to involve the police again. Perhaps she sought solace in reaching out to her mother instead. But the complexities of Sophia's state of mind at the time remain a mystery, clouded by panic and uncertainty. Meanwhile, detectives worked tirelessly to piece together the events of May 26, 2018. The day began like any other, bathed in sunshine and the promise of a festive weekend ahead. Memorial Day celebrations loomed, yet for Sophia and Spencer, the day took a sinister turn. Spencer's work shift ended at 7 p.m., after which their plans dissolved into a haze of uncertainty. Where did they go? Who did they meet? The details are scarce, save for Sophia's car found parked at the University of Connecticut campus around 2 a.m. For reasons unknown, Sophia left her cell phone in the car, whether due to forgetfulness or a drained battery. The couple embarked on their ill-fated journey aboard a small sailboat, its weight a mere 14 pounds, equipped only with oars. With Spencer's confidence in his aquatic abilities bolstering their resolve, they pushed off from shore, navigating perilously close to rocky outcrops, en route to the infamous lighthouse. Their reckless disregard for safety, compounded by the absence of proper equipment, underscored the perilous nature of their venture. Monday evening brought a breakthrough in the search efforts when a police helicopter scouring the coastline spotted a white and blue sailboat wedged among the rocks, coated in a film of dust, some 12 kilometers west of the lighthouse. While authorities suspected this vessel to be the missing sailboat from the campus, potentially used by Spencer and Sophia, conclusive evidence remained elusive. Fingerprints discovered on the boat offered tantalizing leads, yet their analysis and subsequent findings remained undisclosed to the public, shrouding the investigation in further ambiguity. Moreover, conflicting reports initially labeled the vessel as a kayak, only to later clarify it as a white sailboat adorned with red markings. In their quest for answers, investigators delved into the backgrounds of Sophia McKenna and Spencer Mugford. Born on March 7, 1996, in North Stonington, Connecticut, Sophia, then 21, resided in Groton, Connecticut, USA. Raised alongside her siblings Justin and Grace, Sophia cherished her familial bonds, exhibiting a nurturing demeanor toward her younger kin. Despite her tumultuous upbringing, marked by her parents' divorce during her formative years, Sophia remained resilient. Her vibrant spirit, undimmed by adversity. Yet beneath her outward vivacity lay the lingering shadows of past trauma, shaping her life in profound ways. Throughout her high school years, Sophia grappled with a bipolar disorder diagnosis, leading to periods of depression interspersed with manic episodes. These mood swings, marked by intense shifts between euphoria and melancholy, often clouded her judgment and impacted her behavior. Though she diligently sought treatment, including medication and therapy, managing the symptoms proved challenging. Despite her efforts, there was no definitive cure for bipolar disorder, posing ongoing hurdles for Sophia and her family. The illness significantly disrupted her daily life, manifesting in unpredictable behavior and tumultuous relationships with those around her. In 2015, Sophia crossed paths with Austin, a vibrant individual whose charm captivated her instantly. Their ensuing 3-year relationship, however, proved tumultuous for Sophia and her mother, Michelle. Austin's volatile nature, fueled by his use of anabolic steroids, frequently led to heated arguments and even physical altercations, often initiated by Sophia due to her mental health struggles. Despite discovering Austin's infidelity and ending the relationship, Sophia continued to engage with him sporadically. Despite the challenges she faced, Sophia endeavored to forge ahead. Briefly delving into modeling for a local company provided a financial boost for her education. Eventually, she graduated as a massage therapist and secured a position at the Red Door, an upscale spa within a luxurious hotel. It was there that she met Spencer Mugford, her 20-year-old colleague. Spencer, hailing from Florida, shared Sophia's passion for the sea and boasted a promising future. Despite their mutual interests and undeniable connection, their relationship faced opposition from their respective families due to the frequent turmoil surrounding them. Michelle, Sophia's mother, expressed deep concern for Sophia's well-being due to her frequent meetings with Austin and their regular alcohol consumption, which had become almost daily. Despite Sophia and Spencer deciding to remain friends after their relationship ended, the exact reason remains unclear, though Sophia may have rekindled things with Austin. Despite this, Sophia and Spencer continued spending a lot of time together, both at work and outside, including their last day together. After fishermen discovered Spencer's body following days of searching, his family published an obituary in local media. Sophia's family did the same, but continued searching, holding on to hope. They tried to recall the events leading to the disappearance, but no new information emerged. Uncertainty surrounded any additional calls from Spencer's phone beyond those to Michelle's number, as his phone was never recovered, and the police didn't release cell operator records. Cameras at the lighthouse and campus were reportedly out of order, providing no video recordings of the events. It was also revealed that the lighthouse wasn't checked despite the couple's disappearance. In July 2018, Sophia McKenna's close relatives established a Facebook page titled Searching for Sophia McKenna to maintain public awareness of the case. The page facilitated the sharing of information, brochures, and pleas for any relevant details from the public. A peculiar incident occurred weeks after the disappearance, when Michelle received a money request from Sophia's social media account. Given that the police had Sophia's phone, this message raised suspicions of potential hacking. The inquiry into Spencer's demise and Sophia's vanishing reached a standstill. Official findings from the authorities remained inconclusive. Unofficially, various theories regarding the event circulated. Among them, one implicated Austin, Sophia's former beau, suggesting his potential involvement in the disappearance of the young pair. Speculation arose that Austin might have assaulted Sophia with assistance from his companions in disposing of Spencer. Their turbulent relationship, marked by frequent arguments and physical altercations, became a topic of public discourse. Michelle, Sophia's mother, bore witness to several of their conflicts. A month preceding the disappearance, significant turmoil erupted when Sophia uncovered Austin's infidelity on May 8, 2018, prompting the termination of their relationship. In what could have been an act of retribution or a fresh start, Sophia embarked on a relationship with another individual, bringing him to her residence. Austin, incensed, hurried to her abode, where neighbors observed him vehemently banging and kicking the door, hurling invectives at Sophia. After approximately 15 minutes of silence, Assuming Austin had departed, Sophia opened the door only to find him still there, attempting to force his way in. Fortunately, Sophia managed to swiftly shut the door. Neighbors overheard his threats to harm her if she didn't comply. By then, law enforcement and Michelle had arrived, and Austin was apprehended. The following day, May 9th, a restraining order was put into effect. In her testimony, Sophia recounted prior proximity to Sophia. However, Sophia later experienced remorse, leading to a revision of the restrictions. Now, Austin was only forbidden from entering her residence. The individual accompanying Sophia at the time declined to divulge his identity and initially refused to cooperate with the authorities. Michelle initially asserted it was Spencer with Sophia, but later recanted her statement. Nonetheless, a trusted colleague of Sophia revealed the true identity of her companion. Colleagues of Sophia and Spencer confirmed their romantic involvement, behaving as a couple, both at work and in social settings. Witnesses also recounted an incident at a hotel where Austin, Sophia's ex, made a public threat against her. Nevertheless, Austin and his father joined in the search efforts for the missing duo, employing a private helicopter and distributing flyers featuring their images throughout the city. Austin took to social media, proclaiming Sophia as his girlfriend of 3 years, and clarifying that her relationship with Spencer was purely platonic. This focus on their relationship, rather than her disappearance, struck many as peculiar. On July 10th, a memorial in Sophia's honor was arranged by her loved ones. Austin attended the gathering, accompanied by Michelle, and later shared a since-deleted post online, "Rest in peace, baby. We'll meet again soon." According to Austin's account to the authorities, he spent the entirety of May 26th with Sophia, even defying a court order to meet with her, and they had plans for the following day. A friend of Austin reported that around 3 a.m. on the night of the incident, Austin messaged Sophia, claiming to be at the gym with a friend, though the plausibility of this was questioned as gyms are typically closed at that time. Austin's family asserts he was at home before purportedly heading to the gym. An undisclosed witness mentioned Austin and his brother being invited to a party that day. While initially intending to go, Austin later cited fatigue and backed out. These discrepancies cast doubt on Austin's whereabouts during Sophia and Spencer's disappearance, leaving unanswered questions. Described as volatile, possibly exacerbated by alleged steroid use, Austin's acquaintances raised concerns about his temperament. There were speculations of Austin, his brother, and a friend having connections with the local police force. Additionally, rumors circulated about a family member of Austin being married to the police chief overseeing Sophia's case, with allegations of police misconduct against him. However, the credibility of these assertions, provided by a friend of Austin with a criminal history, remains dubious. Following the dissemination of a video on Sophia by a YouTube channel focused on Long Island disappearances, Austin swiftly purged all images of them together from his social media accounts. This action spurred bewilderment, particularly given Sophia's unresolved status. One conjecture posits that Austin sought to sidestep entanglements by showcasing a new romantic interest, although the wholesale eradication of Sophia-related content seemed peculiar. Moreover, Austin's dwindling involvement in the search, mere days after Sophia's vanishing, raised eyebrows. During interactions with investigators, he exuded a demeanor of tranquility, displaying no overt distress over the absence of a close acquaintance. However, such behavior alone does not warrant accusations against Austin, as individuals vary in their responses to stress. One line of thought proposes that Sophia met with foul play to prevent her testimony in a domestic violence case involving Austin. Her absence of testimony ultimately led to the dismissal of the case, mirroring events from the summer of 2018. Notably, Austin is not formally implicated in this speculation. It remains conjectural while the investigation persists. An alternative narrative contemplates the possibility that Sophia and Spencer encountered perilous individuals at the lighthouse. Despite the bustling holiday crowd, witnesses either failed to recall their presence or deemed the information insignificant, resulting in no police reports. Sophia's mother speculated about abduction or human trafficking, though no evidence or ransom demands substantiate these notions. Law enforcement also entertained the scenario of an accident stemming from reckless choices. The young couple embarked on an ill-equipped boat sans life jackets into turbulent currents. Upon reaching the lighthouse, they secured the boat with Spencer's T-shirt, documented their visit, only to realize the boat had drifted away, banking on Spencer's swimming proficiency. Spencer's misjudgment of the water's coldness might have been critical. The obscurity, often altering perceptions of distance, possibly misled him into believing the boat was nearer. Exhausted from his day's labor and the swim to the lighthouse, Spencer faced the peril of drowning. Upon realizing Spencer's absence, Sophia attempted to contact her mother for aid. In a state of desperation, she could have leaped in to rescue Spencer, risking her own life. Despite Sophia's lack of swimming prowess, the influence of alcohol might have driven her to an irrational decision. Another scenario suggests she might have been traversing the lighthouse's narrow ledge, searching for Spencer, only to trip, plummeting with her phone into the water, ultimately succumbing to the current. While these theories persist, they lack official validation and suspects, circulating primarily on social media. Sophia's loved ones persist in their quest for her, yearning for answers. In 2019, an independent detective stumbled upon bones near the shore, promptly alerting the authorities. Regrettably, the bones were dismissed as animal remains upon police inspection, foregoing forensic analysis due to cost constraints. Many facets of the case raise suspicions, warranting a thorough inquiry. The unresolved disappearance of Sophia, a cherished member of a grieving family, demands relentless search efforts. Though bodies of other missing persons have been found in these waters, Sophia's remains elusive. No fresh leads have emerged, leaving the enigma of that fateful night at the lighthouse unresolved. Before Paul met Joanne, he had been in serious relationships with women more than once. For example, in 1993, during his university years, he was with Carrie Thompson. Although he didn't stay with her for long, this relationship revealed his violent tendencies. Carrie told the police about how Paul could switch during an argument and become aggressive, beating the walls and holding Carrie by force. This was just the beginning. In 1999, Jenny Mary Clark appeared in his life. They wasted no time, and just 2 weeks after meeting, the wedding bells were already ringing. However, their marriage began with a real nightmare. On their wedding night, Paul attacked Jenny, and this was not a one-off incident. He continued to beat her and even strangled her into unconsciousness. Investigators claimed that this abusive behavior was repeated with Joanne. Despite this situation, Paul and Jenny decided to have a baby. Their daughter, Chloe, was born in 2000 and they divorced shortly after. When Chloe was 5 years old, Jenny met Joanne and immediately realized that Joanne was too naive for such a rude man and would face a tough battle with Paul. In 2002, he broke up with Jenny and began dating Joanne Nelson. Katie, Joanne's sister, said that Joanne most likely did not know about his criminal history. Otherwise, she would not have continued the relationship or wanted children with him. Their story began on the streets where Paul worked as a security guard in bars and clubs. He was 27 and already experienced in relationships, while Joanne was just starting her journey into adulthood at the age of 19. Despite the age difference, they found support in each other, running away from their parents' control and looking for their own space. At first, they lived with Paul's mother, and then they could afford to buy their own house. But happiness was slowly disappearing, fading away like smoke from a fire. The days turned gray, and the tension grew between them. For Joanne, everything had become too mundane and boring. Their differences began to affect the relationship. She loved order while he did not give it much thought. On February 14, 2005, Joanne did not come to work. This was unusual and caused immediate concern. As the investigation revealed more and more information, the previously quiet and peaceful town was overtaken by a wave of shocking lies and deception. Joanne Nelson, a cheerful and bright young woman, always put the happiness of her loved ones above her own. As a child, she lived with her parents in the town of Hull, also known as Kingston upon Hull, on the east coast of Yorkshire, England. Her mother, Jean, was a teaching assistant, and her father, Charlie, worked as an engineer for the city council. It was in this town that Joanne grew up and became who she was. Joanne had a bright personality and was successful both academically and socially. She was an active athlete who loved netball, lacrosse, and swimming. She lived happily, enjoying her youth but always harbored a deep desire to create her own family. She initially tried her hand at medicine, but the emotional toll of being a nurse proved too difficult for her. Her loved ones remember how she would come home saddened by the suffering of her patients. Later, Joanne considered working abroad, but ultimately chose to work at an employment center in Hull to be closer to her family and friends. She found fulfillment in making people's lives better by helping them find jobs and improve their skills. Joanne's dedication and kindness left a lasting impact on those around her, making her absence even more profound and alarming when she did not show up for work that fateful February day. On Valentine's Day 2005, Joanne Nelson vanished without a trace, turning a day meant for love into a day of horror and mystery. Her disappearance was a nightmare for her parents. When her boyfriend reported her missing to the police, a sense of foreboding filled the air. That night turned dark and ominous, leaving Joanne's family and friends enveloped in fear and uncertainty. Instead of enjoying the evening with his beloved, Paul found himself speaking with the police. He claimed that the last time he saw Joanne was when she was asleep, and upon his return from work, she was gone. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, leaving only shadows of fear and hope behind. At 22 years old, Joanne's sudden disappearance caused great distress among her loved ones. The situation became even more perplexing when she missed significant events, such as her best friend's father's funeral and her sister Katie's 19th birthday. The police swiftly launched a large-scale search operation involving numerous law enforcement officers, military personnel, and volunteers. Joanne's father was vocal about his suspicions regarding Paul, questioning how he could be involved in the disappearance of such a responsible young woman. Katie, although aware of her father's concerns, found it hard to believe that Paul had any role in Joanne's vanishing. The family's worry and confusion only deepened as days turned into weeks without any sign of Joanne. Paul threw himself into the search efforts, collaborating with volunteers, concerned relatives, and friends. Despite lacking family consent, he granted multiple interviews to the press, keen to aid in the search. When questioned by a reporter over the phone, Paul vehemently denied any wrongdoing in Joanne's disappearance. He adamantly professed his love for her, asserting that he could never harm her. However, discrepancies emerged between his spoken words and his facial expressions. Expert Cliff Lansley scrutinized Paul's demeanor during a televised interview, identifying peculiarities. Notably, Paul failed to close his eyes while discussing Joanne, an anomaly for someone grappling with grief. Moreover, he displayed no signs of tears, raising suspicions. Further scrutiny came from Ray Higgins, the head of the investigation team at Humberside Police. Higgins reported observing nail marks on the back of Paul's hand, leading authorities to consider his potential involvement in Joanne's disappearance or death. Eventually, Paul's mother, unable to bear the emotional turmoil any longer, divulged crucial information about Paul's actions to the authorities, potentially shedding light on Joanne's fate. Upon learning of the accusations, Paul didn't attempt to refute his culpability. Just 6 days after Joanne's disappearance, he found himself in police custody. During a grueling interrogation, the truth emerged. On that fateful Valentine's Day in 2005, Paul committed the unthinkable act of ending Joanne's life in their own home. Paul recounted a tumultuous argument that escalated to irreparable heights. Joanne's constant criticism, particularly regarding household chores, served as the catalyst. According to Paul, Joanne's request for help with the washing machine triggered his anger and shame at his perceived inadequacy. Matters worsened when Joanne declared her intention to leave him and demanded the sale of their home for €110,000, further fueling Paul's rage. In a fit of fury, Paul confessed to the police, admitting to strangling Joanne with his bare hands. Subsequently, he displayed chilling composure as he meticulously orchestrated the aftermath, intending to conceal his heinous deed. He craftily devised a plan, seeking to fabricate Joanne's sudden disappearance. With calculated precision, Paul proceeded to carry out his scheme. He engaged in casual interactions with neighbors and discussed banal topics like acquiring a pet, all while concealing the darkness within him. Surveillance footage captured his unervingly composed demeanor as he purchased supplies, a testament to his disturbingly calm facade. Armed with garbage bags, rubber gloves, and disinfectant spray, Paul executed his plan methodically. He bound Joanne's limbs, encased her in bags, and sealed them with duct tape. Then, without hesitation, he transported her lifeless body to her vehicle, his audacity matched only by the magnitude of his crime. The audacious act unfolded in broad daylight, revealing Paul's cunning and deceitful nature. With chilling composure, he concealed his heinous deed from unsuspecting onlookers, demonstrating his ability to manipulate those around him effortlessly. After concealing Joanne's lifeless body in her own vehicle, Paul embarked on a calculated journey. Driving approximately 75 miles to the remote Bradbury woodland near Winteringham in North Yorkshire, Paul carefully orchestrated each step. With meticulous precision, he carried Joanne's body through the dense forest seeking a secluded burial site among the towering pines. Utilizing twigs to obscure the makeshift grave, Paul buried what he perceived as the love of his life. Returning to the victim's car, Paul resumed his facade of normalcy, showing no remorse or acknowledgement of his monstrous actions. He even fabricated a fake phone conversation with Joanne to divert suspicion, further highlighting his cold-blooded demeanor. Despite his attempts to deceive, Paul's consistent actions betrayed an alarming level of planning and premeditation. In the subsequent investigation, Paul's memory conveniently faltered regarding the exact location of Joanne's burial site. Detectives led by the tenacious Ray Higgins embarked on a painstaking 6-week search across 3 counties. Finally, on March 24th, after 39 days of agonizing uncertainty, the grim truth came to light. In a solemn operation led by Detective Phil Gadd, Joanne's remains were discovered in Bransby near York. Trembling with nerves, the search party followed Paul's descriptions until they stumbled upon the telltale signs: a garbage bag concealed beneath branches. Within it lay the heartbreaking evidence: Joanne's body wrapped in plastic, a tragic confirmation of the family's worst fears. March 24th marked the end of a harrowing ordeal for Joanne's family, bringing closure to their anguished search while cementing the grim reality they had dreaded all along. Paul's facade of strength hid a dark history of sexual violence against women, a chilling truth kept hidden from Joanne's family and the public until the trial. During his time working as a security guard at the club, he ominously referred to himself as a psychopath, sending shivers down the spines of those who knew him. Witnesses familiar with Paul from the gym recounted instances where he instigated fights in clubs and bars, painting a disturbing picture of his character. As the trial unfolded, more unsettling details emerged. It was revealed that Paul had been experimenting with steroids in a misguided attempt to sculpt his physique into that of a bodybuilder. His friends disclosed that he had battled alcoholism in the past, and his violent outbursts were likely exacerbated by his steroid use. Paul's educational background provided little insight into the darkness lurking beneath his seemingly ordinary facade. He attended Sydney Smith School before enrolling at Howe College, where he successfully completed a program in constructional engineering. Despite his academic achievements, Paul's journey took a sinister turn when he pursued a degree in horticulture at Bishop Burton College, completing it at the tender age of 17. These revelations painted a chilling portrait of a man whose outward appearance belied the deep-seated demons lurking within. Paul's transformation from a seemingly ordinary student to a perpetrator of unspeakable violence left Joanne's family and the community reeling, grappling with the horrifying reality of the darkness that dwelled within him. Paul's journey through life took him from Saudi Arabia to Somerton Road, where he worked diligently in various industries alongside his father, Peter Dyson. Together, they navigated the maintenance industry, honed their gardening skills, and delved into the intricacies of machining. Paul's employment history painted a picture of a young man eager to carve out his path in the world of work. However, behind the veneer of normalcy lurked a disturbing truth. At the tender age of 15, Paul's life took a dark turn when he crossed paths with Colin Allen, a martial arts expert with whom he formed an unlikely bond. It was to Colin that Paul confessed to a heinous crime, a confession that ultimately led to his arrest. Paul's acquaintances shed light on his complex character. While some saw him as charming and attractive to women, others witnessed a more troubling side to his personality. He often leveraged his position as a security guard to forge connections with women from higher social echelons, revealing a distorted perception of himself and his interactions. Colleagues and relatives offered contrasting portraits of Paul, depicting him as both outspoken and boastful about his athletic prowess, yet also capable of making disturbing statements. Shockingly, Paul's family recounted instances where he proudly boasted about his father's involvement in the deaths of 2 individuals. This seemingly incredulous claim, however, proved to be rooted in reality. Paul's father, Peter Dyson, had indeed served time in prison for the manslaughter of 22-year-old John Dickinson, a man with whom his wife had been unfaithful. The tragic events of 1967 cast a shadow over Paul's upbringing, exposing him to the grim realities of life and death at a young age. Through Paul's tumultuous journey, a complex and unsettling portrait emerged, revealing the interplay between family history, personal choices, and the darkest depths of human nature. In 1974, a mere 2 days after Paul entered the world, tragedy struck with haunting consequences. Peter Dyson, his father, found himself entangled in a fatal accident. Behind the wheel, he collided with 47-year-old Gordon Kell, who was returning home after jubilantly celebrating a silver wedding anniversary. In a chilling turn of events, Peter fled the scene, leaving Gordon to perish on the roadside. Despite the gravity of the situation, Paul idolized his father, viewing him through a lens of admiration and heroism. The untimely demise of Peter in 2000, succumbing to a heart attack in the midst of their life in Saudi Arabia, left an indelible mark on Paul's psyche. It cast a shadow over his existence, shaping the trajectory of his fate in ways both profound and ominous. As the trial unfolded on November 7, 2005, a hushed courtroom bore witness to a startling revelation. Paul, in a dramatic turn of events, stunned onlookers by entering a guilty plea. Joanne's family, bracing themselves for a protracted and grueling legal battle, found themselves thrust into a realm of disbelief and uncertainty. In a moment of collective astonishment, they whispered affirmations as Paul's admission reverberated through the chamber. Throughout the proceedings, Paul maintained a stoic demeanor, his gaze fixed straight ahead or cast downward, deliberately avoiding the piercing stares of Joanne's grieving loved ones and the scrutiny of law enforcement. Not a flicker of emotion crossed his impassive countenance, not even during the formal announcement of the charges against him. His lawyer, Harry Barrell, stood before the court acknowledging the gravity of the situation. With unwavering resolve, he conceded that there could be no excuse for the heinous act perpetrated by his client. In the wake of Paul's shocking confession, a pall of solemnity descended upon the courtroom, marking the beginning of a harrowing journey toward justice and closure. On Tuesday, November 8th, nearly 10 months after the tragic murder, Paul received his sentence, life imprisonment with a minimum term of 16 years. Remarkably, just 14 years later, in November 2019, at the age of 45, Paul found himself transferred to an open prison and recommended for day release. The parole board cited Paul's active engagement in self-awareness programs and successful completion of an intensive interpersonal relationship improvement program. Recalling the day of Joanne's disappearance, Katie was struck by Paul's behavior. She now regrets offering him comfort when he appeared at her doorstep. Later, when Paul wandered off, Katie, consumed by worry, searched for him. Finding him at the bus stop, she squeezed his hands in an attempt to provide support as he sat there, overcome with emotion. She even embraced him, hoping to offer solace. Reflecting on the moment, Katie admitted she hadn't initially noticed the scratches on his arm, but upon later reflection, she couldn't forgive herself for missing them. The easing of Paul's detention conditions and the prospect of day release stirred deep emotional turmoil within Joanne's family. Katie, speaking to the media, expressed their sense of loss and confusion in the face of this news. Paul's impending release dredged up painful memories of Joanne's untimely death, leaving the family grappling with a sense of injustice, despite their belief that Paul didn't deserve such leniency for his heinous actions. On September 14, 1934, the Friday before the start of the fall term at Mount Hermon School for Boys in Mount Hermon, Massachusetts, the campus was already abuzz with activity. The school staff had returned, and 35 returning students were busy preparing for the arrival of the rest of the students and the beginning of classes. Reverend Elliot Spear, the school's headmaster, along with his wife Charlotte, known as Holly, and their 3 daughters, aged 12, 10, and 4, had just returned from their summer vacation at Lake Temagami in Ontario late the previous Sunday night. The Spear family lived in Ford Cottage, a large brick home on the campus. On the evening of the 14th, the family, along with Holly's parents who were visiting, gathered for dinner at their usual time of 7 o'clock. Around 8 o'clock, Headmaster Spear retired to his study on the first floor to handle some paperwork, as was his routine. Holly was in the bedroom directly above the study, conversing with her mother when, between 8:15 and 8:20, she heard a sound she initially thought was an explosion. As she hurried downstairs, her father rushed out of the drawing room, which was across from the study. The headmaster stumbled out of his study, muttering, "I don't know what happened," bleeding from injuries to his right arm and side. Holly and her father helped Elliot to the floor as he began to collapse. A doctor was immediately called, and while they awaited his arrival, Holly and her father worked to control the bleeding. Holly sat on the first step of the stairwell, holding her husband as he lost consciousness. When the doctor arrived, there was little he could do. Elliot Spear was pronounced dead at 8:55 p.m. As people began arriving at Ford Cottage, including police officers and administrators from the school, Holly Spear remained sitting on that first stair, holding her husband's hand. When she was encouraged to go upstairs to lie down, she refused, saying, "No, I don't feel as though I should ever leave this spot." It was not until after her husband's body was taken away that she finally moved from the first step. The wounds the headmaster sustained came from double-aught buckshot fired from a 12-gauge shotgun. 8 pieces of the buckshot had hit him in the chest and shoulder, and 1 had pierced his heart. Based on the angle of his wounds, it appeared as though his killer had shot him as he stood up and reached for something on the bookshelf next to his desk. Headmaster Elliot Spear was just 35 years old at the time of his death. Elliot had been born on November 1, 1898 in Englewood, New Jersey. His father, Dr. Robert E. Spear, was a prominent preacher and writer. He had served as the moderator of the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church and, at the time of his son's death, he was the senior secretary of the church's Board of Foreign Missions. Elliot had been educated at Phillips Academy in Massachusetts before returning to New Jersey to attend Princeton. In May 1917, he put his education on hold to go to England to assist the British Army YMCA's efforts during World War I. He ended up working near the front lines in France, where he was involved in a serious motorcycle accident that nearly cost him his life and forced him to return to the United States in the summer of 1918. When the influenza epidemic began that same year, Elliot volunteered at a makeshift hospital set up to deal with the overwhelming number of patients. He graduated from Princeton with a degree in theology in February 1921. That March, he married Holly, a graduate of Vassar. The couple moved to Scotland so that Elliot could attend the Theological College of the United Free Church in Edinburgh. After completing school there, he worked for the Old First Presbyterian Church in New York City before being named chaplain and head of the Bible department at Lafayette College in Pennsylvania in 1924. During his first year there, he was ordained a minister. Elliot Spear first became affiliated with the Mount Hermon School through his father. The elder Spear was a member of the Board of Trustees for the school and its sister institution. Elliot joined his father, serving on the Board of Trustees of the 2 schools in 1926, and was elected as president by his peers in 1927. In 1931, he was selected as the successor to the headmaster of Mount Hermon, but he took a year to return to Edinburgh to complete his thesis before beginning his tenure in the position. On October 30, 1932, Elliot was installed as the headmaster at Mount Hermon during a ceremony at Memorial Chapel on campus. Spear was a youthful, energetic, and popular headmaster. He was admired by students because he treated them with respect, and he was teased by them for his habit of speeding campus around his dark blue convertible. The young headmaster was beneficial to the school for more practical reasons as well. Soon after being named headmaster, Spear launched major fundraising and financial planning initiatives to secure the future of the financially struggling school. Spear's appointment as headmaster was not without controversy, however. Mount Hermon, founded in 1881, along with its sister school, the Northfield Seminary, founded in 1879, had been established by famed evangelist Dwight L. Moody. The schools were created to provide educational opportunities to children from poor families. As only the very wealthy attended college at this time, the schools were not necessarily designed to prepare their students for higher education. The education bill schools provided was rooted in Christian ethics, with Moody hoping that the graduates of his schools would be positive Christian examples to those around them when they entered the workforce after they graduated. While a world war, major industrial improvements, and the stock market crash of 1929 had all occurred between the founding of the school in 1932, many of the policies of the institution had been left unchanged over that entire time period. Headmaster Spear's predecessor, Headmaster Henry Cutler, had been in the position for more than 4 decades, which only encouraged things to remain as they always had been in the school. Headmaster Spear was a far more progressive leader. He lifted a ban on playing cards, he allowed intramural sports to be played on campus, and he allowed students to read newspapers on Sunday afternoons. He also allowed the male students at Mount Hermon and the female students from Northfield Seminary to socially interact through dances on campus, which had previously been banned. Headmaster Spear even brought up a dance teacher from New York City to instruct students from both schools on the etiquette of dancing, as well as how to waltz. He also focused on improving the quality of the education Mount Hermon provided, elevating the curriculum and bringing in more educated teachers. While most of these changes seem tame to the modern observer, in the early 1930s, they were fairly drastic, especially to the large conservative percentage of the school staff, trustees, and alumni. While Headmaster Spear's appointment was endorsed by his predecessor and enough members of the board to get it approved, it was aggressively opposed by other individuals affiliated with the school. They feared that all the progressive changes Headmaster Spear was enacting were causing the school to lose the Christian identity it had been founded with. Headmaster Spear was a devout Christian and the school remained a religious institution, but there were still concerns that his modern viewpoint was taking away from the original character and mission of Mount Hermon. This, of course, led to concerns that Headmaster Spear had been murdered by some sort of religious fanatic who opposed his more progressive attitudes towards the direction of Mount Hermon. No one suspect who could have committed the crime was found amongst the group of people who opposed Headmaster Spear's policies. This was not because of a lack of effort by the police. By the end of September, they had interviewed more than 250 people in connection to the case. There was also an extensive physical search of the area in the weeks after the murder. Mount Hermon students participated in the search of the campus until they started classes the Thursday after Headmaster Spear's death. During the initial search of the crime scene, a state police trooper had discovered the British mystery novel The Public School Murder amongst Headmaster Spear's collection of books in his study. In the novel, a school headmaster is shot through a window with a rifle as he sat at his desk in his study. Headmaster Spear was known to lend out his books, which made investigators wonder if he had lent the novel to his killer, who in turn based the crime on the events of the book. In the book, the murder weapon was discarded in a lake. This made investigators more determined to thoroughly search the 2 major bodies of water near the crime scene Shadow Lake, which was on Mount Hermon's campus between Ford Cottage and the main road, and the Connecticut River, which was just outside of school property. The lake was drained, and drivers did their best to search the river, but nothing tied to the case was ever discovered. Police slowly cleared suspects of involvement in the crime one by one. One person who they could not clear was Thomas Elder, the dean of Mount Hermon. 55-year-old Dean Elder was an alumnus of Mount Hermon and had been the head of the school's agriculture department, becoming dean when the program was cut from the school. He was an expert on the cattle and their breeding. As dean, Elder had considered himself second in command at the school and expected to be named headmaster when Henry Cutler retired. When he was passed over for the young and vibrant Reverend Spear, Elder, who was in poor health, presumably understood that he had missed his one opportunity to become headmaster, which would give him a motive to get rid of Spear. After Headmaster Spear's death, Elder was one of 3 people assigned to take over the responsibilities of headmaster by committee, but was not even made the chairman of that committee. When he was told of the arrangement, He initially said that he would rather resign than accept it. He viewed this plan as another slate against him, but eventually accepted the arrangement. There are a lot of circumstances that make Elder look guilty. He had called Ford Cottage from Holbrook Hall, the school's administration building, shortly after Headmaster Spear had been shot, demanding to speak with him. This call could have been made to find out if he had been successful in killing Spear. Witnesses who had gone hunting with Elder also claimed that he owned a 12-gauge shotgun, the same type of weapon used in the murder. Elder denied ever owning such a weapon. The day after the murder, Elder was seen with a bandage around his right trigger finger. Those same witnesses who had seen Elder hunt with the 12-gauge shotgun also claimed that the weapon had a faulty trigger guard that could easily cause such an injury to someone who fired it. Elder also drove a dark-colored sedan consistent with a vehicle seen driving away from the general area of Ford Cottage shortly after Headmaster Spear was shot. Shortly after Headmaster Spear's murder, Elder also began circulating 2 letters, one he claimed to have received from the headmaster and one he claimed was his reply to it, that made the 2 men seem to be on very friendly terms. The letters are generally considered to be fakes due to the language used in them, the fact that they were unsigned, factual errors about Headmaster Spear's actions, and the fact that Headmaster Spear would not have had time to type the letter the day it was stated because he was out of his office for almost all of the day. Elders for creating this letter and the response to it is difficult to understand if he did not feel it necessary to divert suspicion away from himself. While all of these facts have led to Elder being considered the main suspect in the case in the decades after the murder, it is important to note that all of these facts are simply circumstantial evidence. Furthermore, some of them have perfectly reasonable alternative explanations. For example, the injury to Elder's finger may not have come from a faulty trigger guard. Francis Bailey, a math teacher at Mount Hermon, had gone with Elder to Ford Cottage after he had made the phone call from Holbrook Hall the night of the murder. Bailey testified that Elder had tripped and fallen, putting his hands out in front of him as he went down as they walked into the cottage in the dark, and had later blamed his injured fingers on this fall. According to Bailey, Elder's hands had not been bandaged while he was at Holbrook Hall that night, which would have been after Headmaster Spear had been shot. The timeline of Dean Elder's actions, as well as the witnesses who corroborate his movements that night, also make it seem less likely that he was the killer. That being said, almost all of these witnesses were very unsure of the exact timing of the events of that night. In the original timeline Dean Elder had given to the police, on the night of September 14th, he had dinner with his wife and then drove his car to Morgan's garage to have a headlight replaced. He then drove back to campus and went into his office in Holbrook Hall at 7:40, where he stayed until approximately 9 p.m. when he made the call to Ford College and then made his way there after hearing of Headmaster Spear's death. However, based on the testimony of the mechanic at the garage, he did not arrive there until 8 or 8:30, which throws off Elder's timeline completely. A senior at Mount Hermon, Albert LaRue, also testified that he had arrived at Elder's home at 8 o'clock that night and that Elder had been home at the time, not leaving for the garage for another 10 to 20 minutes after his arrival. The exact time of Headmaster Spear's murder is not known, but it was most likely between 815 and 820. With this corrected timeline, Elder would not have been in Holbrook Hall at the time of the murder as he claimed, but he would have had a very narrow window of opportunity to commit the crime. Elder lived very close to Ford Cottage, but given his age and poor health, it does not seem likely that he could have quickly made his way through the trees surrounding the cottage in the dark to make the shot and then make a speedy exit from the scene. The date of the headmaster's murder does seem to support the theory that he was killed for his position at the school. However, it is possible that Headmaster Spear was killed just before the start of the new term because that would force the Board of Trustees to name an acting headmaster quickly. Lacking the time to perform a thorough search for a new headmaster, they would most likely appoint an acting headmaster already affiliated with the school, which Elder may have again assumed would have been himself. With the campus due to fill up with students and potential witnesses so soon, September 14th was essentially the last chance the killer would have had to carry out the crime with this reduced chance of being seen. It is possible that the killer watched the window of Headmaster Spear's study every night after the Spear family returned to campus, waiting for the right opportunity. If Elder were in fact the culprit, this would make it more likely that he would have been capable of making his way to the spot where the shot was taken in the dark so quickly despite his poor health and lack of coordination. Elder's trip to Morgan's garage that night may have been an excuse to get out of the house to commit the murder while he still had the chance, as well as to give himself an alibi. While the timeline is tight, it is technically possible for Dean Elder to have left his house at 8:10, driven the 1 to 2 minutes to Ford Cottage, fired the fatal shot between 8:15 and 8:20, and arrived at Morgan's garage just 2.5 miles away at 8:30. With a lack of physical evidence, most importantly the murder weapon, authorities were hesitant to bring charges against Elder despite all the suspicions surrounding him. To try to move the case forward, they instead moved to gather more official witness testimony. On December 3, 1934, Judge Timothy Hayes began presiding over an inquest into the case at the Franklin County Courthouse in Greenfield, Massachusetts, at the request of the district attorney. The testimony given during the inquest was not made public at the time. Witnesses provided testimony until December 14th. On January 9, 1935, Judge Hayes ruled that the evidence presented at the inquest failed to provide enough evidence against any one individual to send the case on to a grand jury. He acknowledged that there was a plausible suspect in the case, presumably Dean Elder, although he was not mentioned by name in the ruling, but argued that all of the evidence presented against him was merely circumstantial and was not very strong circumstantial evidence at that. Dean Elder left the Mount Hermon School shortly thereafter, retiring to a poultry farm in New Hampshire. In 1937, he was charged with threatening S. Allen Norton, a former treasurer at Mount Hermon, with a shotgun. He was acquitted at trial despite eyewitness testimony after his wife provided him with an alibi. He died in September 1948 while classifying cattle at a dairy farm in New Jersey. Holly Spear went on to be the headmistress of 2 different schools for girls over the course of her career. Her 3 daughters, by all accounts, grew into successful and intelligent women. Mount Hermon merged with its sister school in 1971 and is now known as Northfield Mount Hermon School. The identity of Headmaster Spear's killer will most likely always remain unknown. On October 1, 1993, 12-year-old Polly Klaas Petaluma invited 2 friends for a sleepover. The evening proceeded smoothly until Polly's mother, Eva, was abruptly awoken by intense screaming. She soon discovered that her daughter had been kidnapped by an unknown assailant. Lai Hannah Klaas was born on January 3, 1981, in Fairfax, California. Her family comprised her father, Mark, her mother, Eva, and her younger sister, Annie. When she was very young, her parents separated. Following the separation, Polly and her sister went to live with their mother in Petaluma. Mark subsequently entered a new relationship, and Polly developed a positive relationship with his partner. This arrangement created a harmonious family dynamic, where Polly spent time with both parents without any issues. Polly is often described as a quiet and innocent child. Although she had friends, she was generally shy. However, she found confidence in theater. Polly participated actively in school plays and various musicals organized by her community. Frequently cast in lead roles, her primary aspiration was to become a successful actress in musical theater. Furthermore, Polly had a fondness for sleepovers. She enjoyed having friends over and visiting friends' homes for such gatherings, a regular activity within her social circle. On October 1st that year, when she asked Eva if 2 friends, Jillian and Kate, could come over for a sleepover, her mother readily agreed. That afternoon, the friends arrived at Polly's house and spent the evening there quite contentedly initially. At around 9:45 p.m., Eva decided to go to bed due to a severe headache. Informing the girls of this decision and asking them not to hesitate waking her if necessary, she took 2 sleeping pills and fell into deep sleep shortly thereafter. It was past 11 p.m. when Eva was startled awake by the screams of her daughter's friends. Both girls informed her that a man had broken into the house and taken Polly. Eva immediately contacted the police and checked on her other, Annie, who appeared unaware of the commotion. When authorities arrived, they began questioning Polly's friends. The girls described that they had been in a room, engaged in activities like picking Halloween costumes and indulging in general playful behavior. At approximately 11 p.m., Polly suggested it was bedtime, and her friends agreed. She mentioned fetching an inflatable bed she prepared with her mom so they could all sleep together. Upon opening the bedroom door, they were confronted by a man brandishing a knife. The man did not conceal his face with a mask. Initially, due to the proximity to Halloween, the girls mistook this for a prank and laughed. Realizing it wasn't a joke, they became frightened as the man grew angry at their laughter. He forced them into another room and tied their hands and feet. Inquiring who resided in the house, they all identified Polly as the inhabitant. The intruder then removed pillowcases from nearby pillows, placed them over Jillian and Kate's heads, instructing them to count to a 1,000. He assured them he was taking Polly for a brief period, but would bring her back soon. After determining that their captor had left, Jillian and Kate attempted to free themselves. This effort lasted around 30 minutes. Once free, they rushed to inform Eva about Polly's abduction. They relayed this entire sequence to the police and provided a detailed description of the suspect since he didn't hide his face. This enabled officers to create a sketch of the individual for a media investigation. Evidence at Polly's residence was sparse. Footprints noted were from Polly, her family, and recent visitors only. However, fibers found on the carpet differed significantly from those within Polly's home. These fibers were later identified as originating from automotive carpeting material. Police examined vehicles associated with individuals known to be at the house recently, yet found no match with these fibers, leading them to conclude that they belonged to the kidnapper's vehicle. A palm print was also discovered, but couldn't be thoroughly analyzed due to technological limitations at that time. This detailed account provided critical insight for law enforcement's pursuit of justice in identifying and apprehending Polly's abductor. Back in 1993, advancements in fingerprinting, DNA analysis, and other forensic techniques were not what they are today. As a result, the found palm print with any database was not feasible at that time. However, the print was preserved for future comparisons with potential suspects. In Polly's room, another piece of evidence, a fabric that seemed to be silk, was discovered. It looked like it had been cut scissors from a garment and had a distinctive patterns going. Police believed this could aid them in future investigations. Additionally, a hair belonging to an unknown individual was found. Although DNA analysis techniques existed then, they were not yet developed enough to be effectively utilized. The search for Polly became one of the largest searches conducted in the United States up to that point. Around 4,000 volunteers joined the efforts, combing through neighborhoods near her home, vacant lots, and large estates in the vicinity. Police attempted to identify drivers who resembled a sketch of the suspect, but were unsuccessful. Officers aimed to find Polly within 24 hours of her disappearance, because finding her alive would become increasingly difficult after that period. The FBI was involved to assist with the investigation, launching their efforts to locate her as quickly as possible. Despite their best efforts, days went by, and hope of finding Polly alive started to wane. Police questioned neighbors about any unusual activity on the night Polly was abducted. Several neighbors reported seeing an odd man wandering around the area, but they did not suspect he would kidnap someone from a neighbor's house, and thus did not alert emergency services. When police shared a sketch based on descriptions from Polly's friends with these neighbors, they all confirmed having seen the man. Officers also spoke with all the teachers and staff at Polly's school. They aimed to find out if anyone knew the man or had any information regarding Polly's disappearance. Alas, no one had any knowledge, and everyone had an alibi for the relevant time period. None of the school staff matched either the sketch or the description provided. The police even compared fibers found in Polly's house with car mats from teachers and staff members' cars, but none were a match. As days turned into weeks, the desperation of Polly's family, authorities, and the public increased. There was a growing fear that the man who kidnapped Polly posed a significant threat to society. This added more pressure on the police to resolve the case swiftly. A reward of $200,000 was offered for information leading to Polly's whereabouts, sponsored by actress Winona Ryder, who held a press conference urging for Polly's safe return. The Polly Klaas case had another peculiarity. In 1993, internet use wasn't widespread, nor utilized by law enforcement for search operations or information dissemination. However, 3 California residents took it upon themselves to leverage this new technology for the search effort. They posted pictures of Polly, sketches of her kidnapper, and reward details online. Their efforts eventually reached an estimated 25 million people in the U.S. via various internet forums and communication channels. While the FBI hoped this would be pivotal in their investigation, it didn't yield significant leads. Despite heightened publicity and numerous tips, investigators lacked solid leads. Weeks elapsed since Polly's kidnapping. Frustration grew among investigators as they were unable to identify the kidnapper or obtain a DNA match from evidence collected. This sense of helplessness. Mark Klaas received a call from someone claiming to be his daughter Polly. The girl stated she was at a hotel and that her captor had just stepped out briefly, giving her a chance to reach out. Unfortunately, the call was abruptly cut short before any additional details could be gathered. Mark promptly went to the police to inform them about the situation. At that time, the FBI lacked advanced tools to trace previously made calls. Consequently, they waited for another call, hoping to trace it. A few hours later, a second call came in from the same girl who had first spoken to Mark. After receiving this call, the police traced it and were surprised when it led them not to a hotel, but to a residential neighborhood. When officers arrived at the identified house, they knocked and soon discovered it was a prank. A teenage girl, similar in age to Polly, lived there, hence the voice resemblance. She explained her friends had dared her. Rather than taking her to the police station, they asked her parents to monitor her activities and cautioned her against making jokes about such serious matters. On November 28, 1993, nearly 2 months after Polly's disappearance, a woman called the police reporting 3 suspicious objects on a large piece of land she owned. The police and FBI who arrived on site found critical items related to the investigation. A piece of silk, matching one from Polly's room, ballet ties missing since that night, as mentioned by Eva, and duct tape. This discovery led police to speculate that Polly might be in the vicinity. Further investigation revealed new information. On the day of Polly's disappearance, this same woman had reported strangers frequently trespassing on her extensive wooded property, with only a small house and no perimeter fence. The lack of barriers and signage meant many inadvertently wandered onto her land without realizing it was private property. The woman had numerous intruders, but one incident, in particular, stood out. On the night Polly was abducted, a man approached her house in his automobile. His car became stuck in the mud. The nanny, who was caring for the woman's son, first saw the man, but refrained from confronting him due to fear. The homeowner also chose not to approach him, noting an angry expression in his eyes. They then contacted the police. When the officers arrived, they questioned the man about his presence on the property. He stated he was unaware it was private property and expressed willingness to leave quickly, but requested assistance freeing his car from the mud. The officers observed that the man appeared very nervous and scared. He was sweating and seemed possibly drugged. At that time, they lacked the means to conduct a drug test, and since he wasn't being overtly aggressive, they had no grounds for arrest. Consequently, they aided him in extricating his car from the mud, and he eventually drove away. This individual's name was Richard Allen Davis. Richard Allen Davis was born in 1954 in San Francisco, California. His childhood was fraught with violence inflicted by his parents. When Richard was 12 years old, his parents separated. His mother completely disowned him and left him with his father. Richard's father proved to be highly irresponsible, often leaving him alone for extended periods. Sometimes Richard stayed with neighbors or relatives when alone at home became untenable. By his teenage years, Richard started engaging in criminal activities. Stealing things and getting into street fights frequently led to reform school stints. At 17 years old came a significant turning point in Richard's life. He committed a violent robbery that nearly resulted in severe injury to his victim. Faced with 2 options by the court, reform school or joining the U.S. Army, Richard opted for military service but lasted less than 2 years before receiving a dishonorable discharge due to continued misconduct and poor behavior. As Richard matured, he continued to encounter problems, and his criminal record grew significantly longer. Around the age of 20, he received a 15 sentence for robbery and kidnapping. Despite this, he served only 1 year of the sentence due to parole for good behavior. At that period, Richard was also troubled by another accusation. Many friends believed that he had been involved in the disappearance, a 19-year-old girl named Marlene. Although the police concluded that she had left voluntarily, her close friends were convinced Richard had a role in her disappearance after they attended a party together. These accusations remained unproven and were largely based on rumors. When Porley disappeared, Richard was on probation and did not have a specific address. In response, the police issued a special bulletin exclusively for officers, urging them to exercise extreme caution. They withheld information from the media to prevent Richard from potentially fleeing California or even leaving the country. Ultimately, on November 13, 1993, Richard was arrested while driving under the influence of alcohol following a routine traffic stop by an officer. He failed a breathalyzer test. Upon inspection of his identity and photograph, the officer quickly realized that this was the individual linked to the Klaas kidnapping case. Proceeding with care, the officer informed Richard that he was being arrested for violating his probation due to drunk driving. Without resistance, Richard agreed and was taken into custody. Once at the police station, officers read him his rights and disclosed that he was actually being detained for Klaas's kidnapping. During an extensive interrogation session, Richard eventually admitted to abducting Polly. The police speculated that his confession might have been made under duress. Evidence collected included his palm print, which matched one found at Polly's house perfectly. Carpet fibers from Polly's house were identical to those in his car's carpet as well. Polly's friends were brought in for questioning at the police station, where they unequivocally identified Richard as her abductor, stripling closure to their distressful ordeal. Another piece of silk, identical to the one found in the girl's room, was also discovered in his car and on the property of the woman who had contacted the police. Everything was against him, so he finally decided to confess. He mentioned that he had been using illegal substances with friends that day and was not feeling well. He made the decision to break into a house in a certain neighborhood to commit a burglary. Richard drove around for some time before arriving in Polly's neighborhood. He noticed an open window in a house and decided to climb in. According to him, he did not plan anything. Never saw Polly, never saw her family, nor followed them. Once inside the house, he looked for valuables, but found few items of interest. Just as he was about to leave, Polly opened the bedroom door and saw him. Richard observed that Polly appeared very frightened, so he ultimately decided to take her with him. He stated that he put Polly in his car, began driving, and after a while stopped at a vacant lot. There, he violated Polly. Following this incident, he resumed driving. When the woman and babysitter saw Richard on private property, Polly was still in the back seat of his car. When police officers helped him pull his vehicle out of the mud, Polly was still alive. This caused much frustration among law enforcement personnel who believed her life could have been saved. Afterwards, Richard said he drove down the highway where he strangled Polly, dug a grave, and left her body there. On December 4, 1993, Richard informed police about the precise location of the grave, where they began their search efforts. 2 months and 3 days after her kidnapping, Polly Klaas's body was located on the side of a highway in a grave dug by Richard himself. Forensic examination revealed little additional information. It confirmed that strangulation was indeed the cause of death, as stated by Richard. Further details could not be determined with precision. However, it is understood that her death occurred roughly around the time she disappeared. Given all the evidence, the man was put on trial for kidnapping, murder, and rape of Polly Klaas. During the trial, Richard had a chance to speak. He not only apologized to the family, but also made a serious accusation against Polly's father, claiming he abused her. Richard stated that she said to him, "Don't do to me what my father does to me." This caused Polly's father to yell and almost stand up to hit him, though he was restrained by others. The defendant's words shocked everyone present, not just because of his accusation and lack of genuine apology, but also because no one believed Polly's father had done such things. Although it wasn't proven, Polly's former partner even defended him. On June 18, 1996, Richard was found guilty of Klaas's kidnapping and murder. In August of that year, he received a death sentence. He attempted to challenge this sentence but failed. Then in 2006, after overdosing on pills in his cell, he was found unconscious, but revived and sent back to prison. In 2009, his lawyer tried appealing his conviction to the Supreme Court, but was unsuccessful. The Supreme Court confirmed that he should be executed. Richard's attorney mentioned plans for further appeals. As a result of these continued appeals, Richard has remained on death row for several years without being executed. There is hope that once all appeals are exhausted, within the next few years, the execution will proceed as planned. Margaret Ellen Fox lived in Burlington, New Jersey, with her parents and 4 brothers. In 1974, at 14 years old, she graduated from St. Paul's Roman Catholic School and was excited to begin high school in the fall. That summer, her cousin Lynn Parks was looking for babysitting work during the break. She placed an ad in the local newspaper's classified section and received a response from a man who identified himself as John Marshall. He said he lived in the nearby town of Mount Holly and needed someone to look after his 5-year-old son from 9:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m., 5 days a week. He offered to pay Lynn $40 a week plus bus fare to watch the boy at his house, which he mentioned had a pool and a swing set to keep the child entertained. However, Lynn's parents declined to let her take the job because it was in another town. Instead, she passed John Marshall's contact information to Margaret, suggesting that she might want to take the job for some extra spending money over the summer. Margaret called John Marshall on June 19th and agreed to start 2 days later. On the morning of June 21st, she was supposed to take the bus to the stop at High and Mill Streets in Mount Holly, where he would pick her up in his red Volkswagen. The following day, though, John Marshall called the Fox home again. Margaret was not home, so he spoke to her father David instead. According to David, John told him that there had been a death in his family, and he would not need Margaret to start the babysitting job until the following Monday, June 24th. David, who was very protective of his children, did his best to extend the conversation so that he could get a better read of the man who was hiring his daughter. Since he did not pick up on any red flags during the conversation and because the job would only be during the day, he allowed Margaret to take the position. On Monday morning, Margaret and her younger brother, Joe, walked to the bus stop. Joe watched Margaret board the 8:40 bus and then went home. Witnesses would later report seeing Margaret get off the bus in Mount Holly. Margaret had been instructed by her parents to call home when she arrived at John Marshall's house. The call never came. When Margaret failed to call, her parents began trying to get in touch with her. Margaret had left notes by the phone that she had been jotting down during her conversations with John Marshall. Her parents found the phone number John had provided and tried calling it. There was no answer. David Fox called a friend who was on the police force in East Hampton Township, just east of Mount Holly, and the two men began searching the streets of Mount Holly for any sign of Margaret. Back in Burlington, neighbors of the Foxes began organizing search teams as well. None of them found any sign of Margaret. The police would not accept a missing persons report the same day Margaret was last seen, so David Fox was at the police station at midnight to file one as soon as it was June 25th. On June 28th, the Foxes received a phone call demanding $10,000 for Margaret's safe return. This came the day after Margaret's disappearance was first reported in the local media. The next day, they received a letter with the same demand. Margaret's parents rushed to get the cash together, but they never received any instructions on how to deliver it. They did receive another letter 2 days after first calling off the exchange. Given the fact that these demands did not come until after Margaret's case had become more widely known, it is quite possible that the call and the letters were hoaxes. The second letter was also signed so as to indicate that it came from the SLA, a group which was heavily featured in the national news at the time but was not active in New Jersey, furthering suspicion that it was not really from whoever had Margaret. The phone number Margaret had been given by the man calling himself John Marshall was traced back to a payphone outside of an A&P grocery store in Lumberton, New Jersey. There was a man named John Marshall who worked at the store and who was therefore questioned by police. He passed a polygraph exam, which is not conclusive evidence, but he was also working at the store the day Margaret appeared and had co-workers who could confirm that he was there. Since John and Marshall are both very common names, it is unclear if the caller had coincidentally made up this alias on his own, or if he had been trying to implicate the store employee. Men named John Marshall who lived in the area were interviewed by police, as were people who owned red Volkswagens. The FBI compared fingerprints found on the letters sent to the Foxes to the limited pool of prints they had on file at the time. David Fox kept pictures of Margaret in flyers with information about her case taped in the window of his car to spread the word about her disappearance wherever he went. He also went to church every day to pray for his daughter's return. There was a confession in the case in 1976, but it proved to be a hoax. John Marshall was never identified, and Margaret has never been found. Margaret's parents have both since passed away, but her brothers continue to hope for resolution in her case. 18-year-old Olive Walker was one of 11 children and lived in Rotorua, New Zealand. Olive was very quiet, and her father did not allow any of his younger daughters to have boyfriends. She was therefore planning to spend the night of Friday, May 15, 1970, babysitting for her 25-year-old sister, Mary. She left her home around 6:45 to walk to Mary's house on Malfoy Road. She was seen walking by witnesses at 7:50, but never arrived at Mary's house. It would not be until the next morning when Mary watched the news that she learned why her younger sister had never shown up to babysit her children. Around 11:30 Friday night, a group of teenagers arrived at a highway rest area a few miles south of Rotorua. The area was known locally as the Lover's Lane. There, the teenagers discovered Olive's body. She was fully clothed, but her autopsy indicated that she had been raped. She had died of head trauma inflicted by a blunt object. The medical examiner determined that Olive had died sometime between 9:11 p.m., leaving at least 1 hour of time between when she was last seen and when she was killed. At the scene, police found a size 6 shoe print as well as a set of tire tracks. One of the tire prints was distinctive, but no match to it was ever found on a vehicle. Approximately 370 different people were considered suspects during the initial investigation. However, no arrests were made in Olive's case. More than 4 decades after Olive's murder, Detective Sergeant Jack Collins, who had worked on Olive's case, told the media that he had been pressured by the then Assistant Police Commissioner Bob Walton to focus the investigation on a relative of Olive's who had a criminal record. Since there was no evidence implicating this relative and Collins believed him to be innocent, he had refused. The following day, he was removed from the criminal investigation branch and never worked as a detective again. Olive's father passed away in 1982. Olive's sister, Mary, attributes his death to Olive's murder and the stress and heartache it caused him. Olive's case still remains unsolved after almost 50 years. October 24, 1953 was the night of La Crosse State College's homecoming game. Viggo Rasmussen, a professor at the college, was planning to attend the game with his wife and 7-year-old daughter, Rosalind. However, the family's usual babysitter was a student at the college and was also going to attend the game, leaving the Rasmussens without anyone to watch their 20-month-old daughter, Janice, at home. Professor Rasmussen asked another professor, Dr. Richard Hartley of the biology department, if his 15-year-old daughter Evelyn would be interested in filling in as the family's babysitter for the night. Despite her young age, Evelyn was an ideal candidate for babysitter. The student at Central High School was a straight-A student, active in her church, and had a reputation for being hardworking but kind-hearted. Professor Rasmussen picked her up at 6:30 on the night of 24. Evelyn brought flowers for the Rasmussens with her. Before Professor Rasmussen, his wife, and Rosalind left for the game, he asked Evelyn to feed Janice and put her to sleep in her crib around 7 o'clock. Evelyn brought 7 school books with her to study after the baby went to sleep. Dr. Hartley had instructed Evelyn to call home at 8:30 that night, so he could make sure she was all right alone in the Rasmussens' home. The call did not come in at the prescribed time, which was out of character for the usually obedient Evelyn. Dr. Hartley called the Rasmussen house several times, but Evelyn did not answer any of the calls. Worried, Dr. Hartley then decided to go over to the Rasmussens' house on Hockler Drive to check on Evelyn. When he arrived, he could see lights on in the house and hear the radio playing. When he knocked on the door, however, Evelyn did not answer. The door was still locked, so he went to look in the front window. Through it, he saw his daughter's broken glasses and one of her shoes on the floor. Her school books were scattered about the room, and the furniture was knocked out of place. Dr. Hartley frantically went around the house looking for a way inside. In the back of the house, he discovered that the screen had been removed from a window in the basement. Using it to enter the house, Dr. Hartley did not find his daughter, but did find Janice safe in her crib. There was blood inside the house and outside of it, trailing through the yard and on the side of a neighbor's garage. The blood type was found to be consistent with Evelyn's. Police bloodhounds could only trace Evelyn's scent for 2 blocks, leading to speculation that she had been taken away in a car. This theory was strengthened when a witness came forward saying they had seen a young girl in a 2-tone Buick with 2 men. The vehicle had sped out of the Rasmussens' neighborhood at approximately 7:15, the night Evelyn vanished. The search effort was one of the largest in the history of the state of Wisconsin. Neighbors of the Rasmussen and faculty and students from La Crosse State were some of the earliest volunteers. Groups ranging from the National Guard to the Boy Scouts also helped in the effort. Amateur boaters searched waterways, and local hunters were asked to look for clues in the woods. Aerial searches were also performed by helicopter. Within just a few days, more than 2,000 people were part of the search for Evelyn. The Tuesday after Evelyn vanished, blood-stained undergarments that could have belonged to her were found under an overpass of Highway 14, 2 miles south of La Crosse in the town of Shelby. This blood was also consistent with Evelyn's blood type. The area had been searched the day before the garments were found, meaning that they had probably been thrown from a passing car up on the highway either Monday night or early on Tuesday. Also found dumped southeast of La Crosse in a different location were a pair of size 11 sneakers and a denim jacket, each stained with blood that was the same as Evelyn's. The tread of the sneakers matched footprints found outside of the Rasmussens' home, and there had been imprints in some of the bloodstains at the house that appeared to be from denim fabric, potentially linking the jacket to the scene. Investigators argued that the jacket was too small to be worn by someone with size 11 feet, and that these 2 pieces of evidence supported the theory that Evelyn had been abducted by 2 men, although shoe size and clothing size do not necessarily correlate in this way. Over the years, the notoriety of the case led to discredited confessions and wild theories, but no further signs of Evelyn. The Rasmussens sold their home, which they had built just a few years prior, shortly after Evelyn went missing. According to Rosalind, the older daughter of the family, her father descended into a constant state of paranoia about the safety of his family after the incident. In an interview for a news article published just before the 25th anniversary of their daughter's disappearance, Richard and Ethel Hartley admitted that they had lost hope about ever learning what had happened to Evelyn. Evelyn's case remains without answers decades after both her parents passed away. Amy Weidner faced a significant life change when she became a mother at only giving birth to a daughter. This development was notably challenging for her mother, Gloria Weidner. Despite the difficulties, Gloria steadfastly supported her daughter. Little did Gloria know that the complexity of handling her daughter's early pregnancy would soon be eclipsed by an even more distressing event affecting their family just 2 years later. Born in 1973, Amy Weidner was part of a large family that included her older brother, John Paul, who was 1 year older than Amy, and 2 younger sisters, Nay and Cassie, who were 1 and 4 years younger respectively. Their mother, Gloria Weidner, single-handedly raised the children, following a long-ago divorce from their father, who played no role in their upbringing. The family of 5 resided in Indianapolis, where Amy was her mother's primary aide, handling cooking, cleaning, and caring for her sisters. Amy harbored dreams of becoming a teacher. She was known for her bright and cheerful demeanor as well as an engaging smile. However, at age 14, Amy's life took an unexpected turn when she became pregnant. Initially hesitant to share the news with her mother, she concealed her growing belly under loose clothing for over 5 months. Eventually, the pregnancy became difficult to hide any longer. After nearly 6 months, Amy found the courage to approach her mother. Breaking down in tears, she revealed her situation. "Mom, I don't want you to hate me," she tearfully confided. Although taken aback by the news, Gloria embraced her daughter with comforting words of support despite feeling overwhelmed and uncertain about what lay ahead. "I was stunned. I just couldn't believe it," Gloria recounted later. "I thought it was the worst thing that could happen in my life," she added, unaware of even more heart-wrenching events that were yet to unfold. Amy Weidner's baby was fathered by Tony Abbott, 20, who was a friend of her elder brother. Their relationship had been a well-kept secret. None of their family members were aware of their intimacy until Amy's pregnancy came to light. Gloria, Amy's mother, swiftly intervened. She prohibited any further contact between Amy and Tony. She insisted that Amy cut ties completely with the father of her unborn child, laying down strict conditions for her daughter's future interactions. On October 25, 1987, Amy Weidner embraced motherhood by welcoming her daughter Emily into the world. Remarkably, just 6 days after giving birth, Amy resumed her education. Now she juggled the responsibilities of being a new mother. Gloria Weidner, recognizing the importance of education for her daughter's future, provided unwavering support to Amy. She often cared for Emily to facilitate Amy's schooling. Gloria also acknowledged Amy's need for a typical teenage life and allowed her time with friends. Amy's dedication to her studies never waned, even amidst the demands of motherhood. She continued to excel academically, earning praise from her teachers for her diligence and hard work. The Weidner family adapted to the new addition by sharing the responsibilities of caring for Emily. Life seemed to be realigning on a positive path as years passed. Amy successfully navigated her challenges. However, just as they found their footing, a sudden turn of events altered everything. On November 13, 1989, 16-year-old Amy awoke with a severe sore throat and decided to stay home from school with her 2-year-old daughter Emily. When Gloria offered to take Emily to the nanny's house, Amy opted to keep her daughter with her. After the family shared breakfast, they dispersed for the day. Gloria headed to work, and Amy's siblings went off to school, leaving Amy and Emily at home alone. Concerned after no answer from multiple calls made at 9:30 a.m., and again hours later, Gloria asked a neighbor to check in on them. The neighbor's report of an unresponsive and unusually quiet house worried Gloria, so she left work and rushed home. Upon arrival, she found Emily sitting on the stairs. Receiving no answer to her calls for res, Amy prompted her venture upstairs. The scene in Amy's bedroom was tragic and shocking, a moment etched forever in memory. Amy lay lifeless and unclad on her bed, surrounded by a significant amount of blood. In a state of emergency, Gloria immediately dialed 911. Upon arrival, the police commenced a meticulous examination of the Weidner residence. Simple glass jar piggy bank containing around $50 saved for school. There were no signs of forced entry. The perpetrator might have entered through an unlocked back door, or possibly the front door, opened by Amy herself. Crucial evidence was found in Amy's room. There was bloody palm print on the bed linen and wall, along with several strands of body and head hair, presumably from the assailant. The medical examiner concluded that Amy Weidner sustained a blow to the head with a sharp object. She was sexually assaulted and ultimately strangled. It's deeply unsettling that Emily, Amy's 2-year-old daughter, could have witnessed these harrowing events. Fortuitously, she was found unharmed. Recognizing any information Emily might provide as potentially valuable, police made efforts to communicate with her despite her young age of just over 2 years. They used finger puppets to create a more child-friendly environment and gently probed for details she could recall. During this interaction, Emily, energetically moving around, mentioned only that her mother seemed very angry that day. As part of the evidence collection process, police sectioned off and removed the portion of the wall bearing the assailant's bloody palm print. They also gathered the victim's clothing and bed linens from the crime scene to aid their investigation into this tragic case. In their pursuit for answers regarding Amy Weidner's case, detectives initiated inquiries among her family, friends, and nearby residents. John Paul, Amy's 17-year-old brother, mentioned how the investigators initially suspected him during the interrogation. However, he had a reliable alibi, and no evidence linked him to the incident. Tony Abia, Amy's former boyfriend and Emily's father, was also interrogated. He expressed deep affection for Amy and denied any harmful intentions towards her. Tony had a solid alibi for the day of the crime. The police's attention was also drawn to Troy Jackson, who lived next to the Weidners. He knew about the stereo system stolen on the day of the murder. Despite his denial of involvement and the absence of any bruises or scratches on his hands, Troy provided hair samples that did not match those found at the crime scene. After passing a polygraph test, suspicions against him were dropped. Besides these three, the police interviewed other acquaintances, neighbors, and classmates of Amy. Fingerprints and hair samples were taken from all of them, but none fell under suspicion. Amy Weidner's funeral was held shortly afterward, drawing a considerable crowd who wished to pay their respects. Her death was deeply felt within the community. Detectives attended the funeral too, carefully observing the attendees as part of their ongoing investigation. A particularly poignant memory was a cherished photograph of Amy where she wore her favorite white turtleneck vest with a floral design. It was in this beloved attire that Amy, a young girl whose life was tragically cut short, was laid to rest. In the aftermath of their tragic loss, the Weidner family clung to hope that Amy's killer would be swiftly apprehended and brought to justice. Yet as days turned into weeks and then months, no suspects were identified. Following Amy's passing, Gloria Weidner legally adopted her granddaughter Emily, stepping into the role of motherhood once again. The weight of grief and fear burdened Gloria. She was haunted by thoughts of the perpetrator and worried about her family's safety. She never left her daughters unattended at home and lived in a state of constant anxiety with the assailant still at large. Gloria even considered relocating to a new home for safety reasons. Financial constraints limited their options, leaving them to navigate these challenging times in their current residence. Amy's friends were also deeply affected by the tragedy, consumed by fear that the criminal might target them next. They requested their parents to fortify their homes, even boarding up windows with planks, a precautionary measure against a similar fate. One day, Gloria returned home expecting to find her younger daughters back from school. Upon entering, she was met with an unsettling silence. The house felt unusually empty. She noticed that the girls' outdoor shoes were in their usual spot. A surge of dreadful thoughts raced through her mind, apprehending another calamity with each step towards the upstairs. The distance felt increasingly vast. Standing at the threshold of their bedroom, Gloria steeled herself for what she might find. Upon entering, she discovered, much to her relief, that her daughters had merely fallen asleep. As time went on, Emily, Amy's daughter, matured. She was spared the memories of the tragic events surrounding her biological mother. Emily had no recollection of the police interrogation or being informed of her mother's demise. The detectives periodically revisited the Weidner family, inadvertently causing them to revisit the pain of that dreadful day. Gloria revealed that there came a time when this continual revisiting became too much to bear. She yearned for one thing, for the authorities to allow her family some peace, and to cease reawakening memories that could not bring Amy back. 13 years after Amy Weidner's murder in 2002, an unexpected development arose in the case. The Indianapolis Police Department received a call from a 29-year-old man claiming to have had a dream where Amy communicated with him about her demise. Although he provided details about the murder, most of this information had already been disclosed in news reports. The police investigated this individual, who was 16 at the time of the incident, and resided across the street from Amy's home. His fingerprints and DNA were examined to determine any potential involvement, but no matches were found, leading to his release. While his call didn't contribute significant evidence, it prompted detectives to re-examine the cold case in 2002. The investigation re-engaged with some of Amy's friends and acquaintances, particularly those who had encountered legal issues over the intervening years. Despite renewed efforts, the investigation once again reached an impasse, leaving the case unsolved. In 2011, a Facebook group titled Remembering Amy Weir was established by Amy's friends, reigniting interest in her unsolved case. The detective responsible for the cold case, unfamiliar with Facebook, enlisted the help of his colleague, Detective Bill Carter, to print out information from the group. This task piqued Carter's interest in Amy Weidner's case. Although his expertise was in non-homicide-related illegal activities, Carter felt compelled to explore the case files of Amy's murder during his free time. Carter delved deep into the 2-decade-old case. He scrutinized every detail in the file, re-examining evidence and reviewing school attendance records from the day of the murder. He also scrutinized the funeral attendance list. He inputted the case details into a database and identified overlooked leads, including several friends of Amy's brother, who had never been interviewed by the police, nor had their DNA been collected. In his pursuit of new leads, Detective Carter reached out to the Weidner family and Amy's friends in 2011, seeking names of individuals who might possess information about the case. He initiated DNA collection from persons previously overlooked in the initial 1989 investigation following the crime. The police had canvassed the neighborhood where the Weidners lived and documented residents' names. Amy had long-standing friends, and while she reiterated most of the previously known and investigated, she also mentioned an unfamiliar name to Detective Carter, Rodney Dink. In 2012, Detective Carter received authorization from the Cold Case Unit to formally take on Amy Weidner's case. His first step was to locate Rodney Dink to ascertain whether he could be a potential suspect. The Weidner family was quite familiar with Rodney, as he was a friend of Amy's older brother, John Paul. They spent time together engaging in activities like biking and fishing. When Carter inquired about Rodney with John Paul, he described him as a reserved individual who largely kept to himself and had never aroused suspicion. Carter visited the home of 40-year-old Rodney Dink, who resided with his mother near the Weidners. Rodney was employed at an auto parts store, had been divorced for some time, and had a grown son with whom he had minimal contact. Upon Carter's arrival at Rodney's residence, his mother greeted him and informed the detective that Rodney was at work. Carter left his business card requesting Rodney contact him upon his return. That evening, Rodney called Carter, who promptly requested a meeting to discuss Amy Weidner's murder case. Rodney consented to the meeting and allowed Carter to visit at his house. However, when Carter returned for the meeting, Rodney was nowhere to be found. Carter examined Rodney's criminal background and found that he had previous charges for assault in 1991 and theft in 1997. With Rodney's fingerprints already in the database, they were compared with the palm print found at the Weidner residence. This test aimed to either connect or exonerate Rodney from the crime. When the results came back, they confirmed a match between Rodney's prints and the bloody palm print at the crime scene. After 23 years, a suspect was finally identified. However, Rodney had vanished from his home, prompting an intensive search by the police. The breakthrough came when Rodney's credit card brandishing a knife and declaring his innocence. He ultimately injured himself during the encounter. He attempted to attack the officers but was subdued with a taser, handcuffed, and then taken to the hospital. During a 2-day hospital interrogation that was recorded on camera, Rodney confessed to Amy's murder. He initially claimed his intent had been burglary and had not anticipated Amy's presence due to her illness. Rodney recounted entering through a sliding glass door and being startled by Amy. In a panic, he hastily grabbed the nearest object and struck her on the head, which led to her death. As he recounted the incident over 2 days, Rodney frequently mentioned his vague recollection of the events of that day. He attributed this fogginess to the 23 years that had elapsed since the crime occurred. His account of his actions lacked precision. At one point, he even suggested he had visited the house with an acquaintance he referred to as Bag. However, Rodney struggled to recall clear details about this supposed accomplice and could not provide a description of their appearance. According to Rodney, Bag had initially kept watch outside before joining him inside, where they both confronted Amy. When questioned about Emily's presence during the incident, Rodney claimed he did not see her, nor was aware of her cries in the house, oblivious to the fact that she had been nearby throughout the ordeal. Throughout the interrogation, Rodney remained composed and polite, not exhibiting behavior typically associated with a murderer, possibly due to the passage of time since committing the crime. His DNA sample was taken, and as anticipated it matched that found in 1989 on Amy Weidner's bedsheet and blanket. The disclosure of Rodney's guilt came as a profound shock to the Weidner family. They struggled to reconcile the image of the quiet, unassuming Rodney with his heinous act. Rodney wasn't just Amy's older brother John Paul's friend and classmate. He also lived across the street and frequently visited their home. Remarkably, Rodney had even attended Amy's funeral, mourning with others and extending condolences to Gloria Weidner. Later, Detective Carter discovered Rodney's signature in the guest book at Amy's funeral. Upon revisiting the case, he found that Rodney's name was first mentioned in 2003 by Tony Abercrombie, Amy's former boyfriend and Emily's biological father, who pointed out Rodney's regular visits to the Weidner family. Carter deduced that back in 1989, for some unknown reason, Rodney Den had evaded suspicion entirely. He wasn't considered a suspect or even questioned at that time. In 2012, while investigating Rodney Dan's background further, detectives unearthed another grim detail. Rodney's biological son Dylan Danke was imprisoned for a crime committed in 2009. At just 16 years old, Dylan had fatally assaulted his birth mother, Mary McHenry. He claimed he acted out due to her abuse and insults, ultimately using a baseball bat to inflict fatal injuries. Tragically, Mary succumbed to her wounds. Dylan turned 17 just days after the incident. This eerie parallel, father and son committing significant crimes at almost similar ages, struck detectives as both chilling and peculiar. Despite having minimal involvement in Dylan's upbringing due to divorcing Mary McHenry early on, Rodney appeared at Dylan's trial in 2009 and agreed to a plea deal, resulting in a 20-year prison sentence. Dylan's anticipated release will be in 2029, when he turns 37 years old. In the ongoing investigation of Amy Weidner's case, Rodney Dink initially maintained that he had an accomplice during the crime, a young man. In June 2013, merely 10 days before his trial was scheduled to commence, year-old Rodney recanted his previous statement. He admitted to acting alone in the murder of Amy, asserting that no one else was involved. As a result of this confession and the evidence against him, Rodney received a sentence of 65 years in prison. Following the resolution of Amy's case, the Weidner family arranged a gathering with Detective Bill Carter. They commemorated the 24 years without Amy by releasing 24 balloons into the sky. The family expressed their gratitude for Detective Carter's pivotal role in the case. It was Carter who pinpointed Rodney Den as the perpetrator within just 12 days of delving into the case and brought the investigation to a close. In recognition of his outstanding work, Detective Bill Carter was honored with an award by the Indianapolis Police Department in January 2014. Despite an offer to join the Homicide Investigation Department, he chose to remain in his current role. Emily Ware, Amy's daughter, matured into adulthood. She graduated from the same high school her biological mother had attended before pursuing higher education at a university. Seeking broader opportunities, she relocated from Indianapolis to California. Gloria Ware, Amy's mother, openly shared her enduring grief and daily remembrance of her daughter. She continues to reside in the house where the tragedy unfolded. Amy's room, still adorned with her photographs, now welcomes Gloria's grandchildren during their holiday visits. This brings a new sense of joy and life to a space once marked by loss. 41-year-old Paul Fugate was a law enforcement park ranger at the Chiricahua National Monument, a unit of the National Park Service in the mountains of southern Arizona. On January 13, 1980, he was the only permanent staff member working at the visitor center. Between 2 and 3 p.m. that afternoon, Paul told his lone coworker, a seasonal employee, that he was heading out to patrol some of the nature trails. He instructed the coworker to start closing down the center for the day if he wasn't back by 4:30. According to the coworker, Paul left the visitor center without his radio and headed toward the trails leading to Fairway Ranch, a large piece of land recently acquired by the Park Service. He never returned. The following morning, the park superintendent called Paul's wife, Dottie, to inform her that he was missing. Search teams, K-9 units, helicopters, and small planes conducted an extensive search of the area, but found no trace of Paul. Federal, state, and local agencies joined the investigation, but none of them discovered any sign of him. The Park Service offered a $5,000 reward for information about Paul's disappearance, which was matched by his family. Within a few years, this amount grew to $20,000. The initial assumption made by the Park Service was that met with foul play. Paul's wife, Dottie, continues to hold this belief. Dottie believes that her husband happened upon some sort of drug deal out in the wilderness and was abducted in a panic when the dealers saw the badge on his uniform. The Park Service paid Paul's wife a portion of his salary as survivor's benefits when he first went missing. However, the director of the Park Service's Western Region, Howard Chapman, reviewed the case in 1981 and that Paul had not gone missing, but had rather abandoned his post. He was, therefore, formally fired as a park ranger, and Donnie was ordered to pay back the almost $7,000 in payments she had received plus 11% interest. She was told she could not appeal this decision because such an appeal had to occur within 20 days of an employee's termination, and Paul's termination had been applied retroactively to the date he disappeared more than a year prior. It took Dottie 5 years of fighting before the National Park Service re-examined the case and had Paul listed as deceased rather than as a deserter in 1986. Dottie received all of the financial benefits she was entitled to. Paul's case was classified as a probable homicide by the Cochise County Sheriff in 1988. On June 19, 2018, the National Park Service tripled the amount of the reward in Paul's case. Bringing it up to $60,000, they announced that they had new information in the case that inspired this renewed appeal to the public. They did not reveal what this new information was. The increased reward has so far not brought forth any answers in Paul's disappearance. Thelma Pauline Melton was known to her friends as Polly. The 58-year-old lived in an Airstream trailer with her husband Bob. They lived in Jacksonville, Florida, but spent several months out of the year in western North Carolina, where they shared a large rented campsite with friends just outside of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Peggy and Bob had only been married for 6 years, but Peggy herself had been coming to the area for over 20 years. On September 25, 1981, Peggy and 2 of her friends from the campsite site, Trula and Red, set out for a walk, which was fairly routine for the 3 friends. They left at approximately 3 p.m., walking along the Deep Creek Trail, which took them into the national park. A quarter mile into the park, they went right at a fork in the trail that took them past a campground and picnic area. The group walked a mile past the campground before turning around, pausing so that Polly could smoke a cigarette. On the walk back, Polly suddenly began walking much more quickly and soon got ahead of her 2 friends. She disappeared out of Red and Trula's view over a small hill, and they did not see her again even after reaching the top of the hill themselves. Assuming Polly had just kept up her quick pace, they went to Polly and Bob's trailer when they got back to the campsite at 4:30. However, Bob told them that Polly had not come back and that he had not seen her since she had left with them an hour and a half earlier. Bob began calling around to friends while Trula and Red retraced their steps on the trail and searched the campground. They did not find any sight of Polly. At 6 o'clock, Polly was reported missing to the park rangers. The park rangers were able to assemble a search team of 25 people to look for Polly that evening. The trail was later closed so that 150 people and a team of search dogs could search for her. That search went on for a week, but was unsuccessful. Polly was very familiar with the trail she had been on when she disappeared, and it was a fairly easy hike, so it was hard to imagine that she had gotten lost or off trail somehow. She was also reportedly terrified of snakes, so her friends did not believe that she would have willingly gone off trail. She was not in good health, but was just under 6 feet tall, so her friends believed that there would have been signs of a struggle on the trail had she been abducted. The most popular theory about Polly's disappearance is that she voluntarily walked away from her life and had made arrangements for someone to pick her up along the trail, which is why she had to walk ahead of her friends. The campground had been very busy the day she went missing with 50 cars in its parking lot, so a vehicle would not have been suspicious in the area. Polly had lost her driver's license due to medical issues and, as such, did not carry a key to the station wagon she and Bob owned, which did not go missing with her anyway. If she left the area in a vehicle, another unknown person was involved. Polly's pastor provided some insight into who that other person could be. According to the pastor, Polly had made statements to him that he believed indicated that she was having an extramarital affair, although she never said so outright. He also revealed that Polly had a history of mental health issues, which were largely situational and seemingly under control by 1981. However, in addition to her own health issues, Polly was also dealing with the medical conditions of her husband. Bob was 20 years older than Polly and in declining health. The stress of caring for him could have been a motive for Polly to become involved with someone else and choose to run away with them. During her time in North Carolina, Polly volunteered at the Presbyterian Nutrition Center where she served meals to the elderly. The day before she went missing, Polly had not signed up at the end of her shift to volunteer the following day, despite the fact that she normally worked every weekday. Furthermore, according to the center's supervisor, Polly had asked to use the phone several times that day. In the 4 years she had been volunteering there, she had never previously used the center's phone. Police could not trace who Polly called, but they did know that the calls Polly made had to be local, as no long-distance charges were made to that phone line. It is possible that Polly made these calls to arrange being picked up the following day inside the park. The idea that Polly ran away to start a new life with someone else is undermined by the fact that she left with nothing more than her cigarettes. If she really wanted a fresh start, however, she may not have wanted to take possessions from her previous life, no matter how practical it would have been to take them. The one potential exception to this rationalization, however, would be the prescription medicines she was taking for high blood pressure and nausea, which were left behind. Polly's husband Bob was so upset by his wife's disappearance that he had to be admitted to the hospital the night she went missing. In 1982, Bob, with the help of his sons from a previous marriage, sold the Airstream trailer he had shared with Polly and went to live in a nursing home. Polly Melton has never been found. Joseph Wood Jr. was an accomplished 34-year-old journalist from a close-knit family in the Bronx. He graduated from Yale with honors in 1990 and had received a grant that allowed him to travel to Ghana to write his first book. Back in New York, he began working as a writer and editor at The Village Voice. In 1996, he left The Village Voice to take a job at the New Press. By 1999, he had also begun work on a new book about the African-American family. On July 7th that year, Joe traveled to Seattle for Unity 99, a conference for minority journalists. At the first Unity conference at Atlanta in 1994, Joe had met Samini Sengupta, a reporter for the New York Times. The two had become romantically involved and had lived together for several years, but had broken up at the beginning of 1999. They saw each other briefly at the opening ceremonies for the 1999 conference. That night, Joe had dinner with friends and mentioned to one of them that he was planning to visit Mount Rainier National Park the following afternoon to do some bird watching after attending a press breakfast with presidential hopeful Bill Bradley. Joe had loved the outdoors since he was young, progressing through Boy Scouts until he achieved the rank of Eagle Scout, so these plans were very much in line with his interests. Joe was not at any of the conference events from July 9th onward, something his many friends took note of but were not initially concerned by. When Joe failed to return to New York on July 11th, however, Samini Sengupta began making inquiries into where he was. Having no luck getting a hold of Joe or finding any information about where he might be, she formally reported him missing and hired a private investigator. The private investigator learned of Joe's plans to visit Mount Rainier from the friend he had talked to at dinner the night of 7th. Authorities located Joe's rented Mercury Marquis in the Longmire parking lot inside of Mount Rainier National Park. A receipt inside of the car revealed that he had entered the park at 12:29 on July 8th. A search for Joe began, but there was a massive area for the search team to cover. The biggest break in the case came on the morning of July 15th when a man named Bruce Gaumond contacted authorities. Bruce had seen an article about Joe's disappearance in the newspaper and came forward with the last known sighting of Joe. Bruce had been hiking on the Rampart Ridge Trail on the afternoon of July 8th. There he ran into Joe, who was on his way up, while he himself was on his way down. At the time, they were at an altitude of roughly 4,800 feet. The two men chatted about the birds they had seen for a few minutes, and Joe asked Bruce about how much farther he could expect to go up the trail. Bruce advised him that he could only go on for another 5 or 10 minutes before encountering a snow bridge that did not look sound. Bruce then continued back down the trail, and Joe continued up after assuring Bruce that he would be turning around soon. While Bruce's statement was the high point of the investigation, because it helped narrow down the search area, the search teams quickly ran into even more problems. Snow and ice were a major issue in the search for Joe. While he had gone on his hike on a warm July day, Mount Rainier had experienced unusually heavy amounts of snow over the winter. Joe had been hiking on packed-down snow at the altitude he was last seen at, and much of it had melted over the several sunny days following his disappearance, leaving no tracks for searchers to follow. The warm weather ended on July 16th when heavy rains brought in cooler temperatures. With the search now being much more dangerous in these conditions, many of the members of the search team were not able to continue on for the day. On July 18th, the National Park Service announced that they were scaling back the search for Joe. Park rangers explained to Joe's family that they believed that he had suffered some sort of accident. When Bruce Gorman saw him, he was wearing a light shirt and did not seem to have any provisions or equipment with him beyond his binoculars and birdwatching book. Even if he had remained alive but immobile somewhere on the mountain, he would have almost certainly fallen victim to hypothermia when the rains and cold temperatures ruled in. In the absence of Joe's remains to prove this theory, Joe's parents have not ruled out the possibility of foul play in his disappearance. Park rangers dismissed this possibility, arguing that if Joe had been in a struggle with someone on the mountain, it would have resulted in scent trails that the dogs used in the search would have picked up. Joe's literary agent raised money amongst Joe's friends to hire a former NYPD detective to work on the case after the search was scaled back. Despite these efforts, no sign of Joe has ever been found. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.